I've been obsessed with reading sad books all my life. Like, you've heard of chick lit? Well, I like to read sick lit. They're usually books about teenagers dying of like incurable diseases or suffering tragic consequences. It's a thing, it's a whole thing, a sad thing, and I love it. I'm having a really good time. These books actually have a huge audience, and they've been made into movies like The Fault in Our Stars, Me Before You, My Sister's Keeper. But there was one woman who, in my and the internet's humble opinion, really gave the genre life or death, and her name is Lurlene McDaniel. She's written 75 sick lit titles, like 6 Months to Live, 16 and Dying, She Died Too Young, They Usually Die. Lurlene McDaniel is known in the literary world as the crying and dying lady, and she has a cult following of sad story fans who have been reading her books ever since they were 13, including me.
I knew exactly in the 90s who my reader was. Those girls, you girls, were just absolutely profiled in my mind. And when I first started writing, I started with school book fairs, and I wrote 6 Months to Live for them. And it was so successful. Did not get the kind of royalties that we should have off that one, but I digress. Anyway, then at the time of my divorce in '88, I knew I had to either make writing work for me or get a job. It was scary. And I moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee from Tallahassee and started fresh. I flew to New York and through a mutual friend hooked up with their agency. And they've been my agent for all these years. They walked down the street and sold me to Bantam Books. That kind of blessing, really, and providential oversight, so to speak, to stay with the same people over and over and over for all these years, 35 years. Hello.
35 years as the quote I read of crying and dying.
Yeah, crying. That's what the librarians like to call me, the crying and dying lady. But I can sell a lot of books because I know who my reader is. And that's one of the reasons which makes writing in today's market a little, different. Because I don't know the teen of today. And you heard it here first, but I'm retiring. This is it.
Really? Wow. So this is no more books.
No, this was The Girl with the Broken Heart is my last book, and it came out in December, and I'm going to write a letter to my readers that I'll put on my Facebook page. I'll keep the Facebook page open for a few years and all of that, but it's time. I'm tired. And
The Girl with the Broken Heart is now me. And it will be so many girls with broken hearts, but in total understanding. Why did you decide to, put down the pen?
Hang up the quill in my vernacular. Because it was just time. I had a wonderful career. I did not know the teen of today. I don't know them. And they're attracted to fantasy and dystopia type novels. And I do not write that. And I'm a realistic writer. As
real as I ever read as a teenager. Truly.
And frankly, they see so much on television now about the stuff I wrote about for years and years. So any medical show, I've seen my themes gone over and over and over.
That's a great point.
And so I didn't have anything left to say. And after Broken Heart, I have 2 grown sons, 10 grandchildren, and they're growing up right in front of my eyes, and I want to be, we're all close, geographically as well as, emotionally.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And it was time. It was just time. So.
Wow. So, and even thinking too, I wanted to bring this up, I had gone, just in my research, I'd gone to the YA section at my library, and it was really interesting to me to see exactly that. I saw the biggest thing that I noticed was suicide.
Yes.
And that was something that in all of the, the sick lit and the sad books that I'd read as a teenager, I don't honestly remember reading one. And
of course not. Right.
It was, I would say, half of the titles that I was kind of attracted to grabbing, which I thought was really interesting. Obviously, times are much different than they were when I was reading those books in the 90s, and I think kids really are dealing with that much more than I ever had to, much more than any generation ever had to.
Agree.
So I thought that was interesting. The dystopia thing is also very interesting to me. I've been thinking a lot about dystopia lately, and how really truly bothered by it. Now, I know that for fun I read books about girls who have cancer, but there's something
but
about
with hope.
But with
that
hope.
Was the thing I inserted into every book.
Yes.
That what you've read the generic background, so you know that diabetes kind of took over my life.
Yes.
And raising my son Sean became a lifelong mission. I used to say, dear God, don't let him die on my watch, please. Because diabetes now is all about management. It's not about necessarily diagnosing. They aren't working as hard for cures as they are for managing the disease as it is.
Yeah.
And of my 10 grandchildren, 4 of them are type 1 diabetics. And so it's still very dear to my heart. Anyway, that's what drove me to write these stories, because all the ill children were disenfranchised. No, they were afraid. When I wrote 6 Months to Live, kids were afraid to sit next to a kid in their class who had leukemia because they thought they'd catch it.
Right.
So it became an educational process, but the goal of fiction is to provide entertainment. So I had to rethink and two things. One thing I've really learned over time is that there are 2 emotions that all of humanity shares, and these emotions transcend race, creed, color, and culture. And those 2 emotions are grief and love. And those were the 2 elements I put into every single story. And you spoke of suicide, and that's why I put that theme in the girl with, it's a kind of a sub theme that goes through it. But because if you've not read the book, I'll be glad to send you a copy.
I would love that. I haven't.
Autograph to you.
I would absolutely love that.
And anyway, those, when you tap into those dynamic emotions, they touch everybody in some way. So that's really what I was talking about.
Right. And like you said too, in every book with the grief came that love. Now, in dystopia, which I find really very hopeless.
Hopeless. Yes.
Yeah. There is, I guess, there's always a hero or heroine who succeeds in a goal and there's still love. But I think that what I loved about your books was that it gave me a chance to troubleshoot real emotions and also my deepest, darkest fears in a really honest way. And it wasn't the way I put it is I would put that book away and then I would walk into a bright, sunny day, and I still had all the same problems I had when I started the book, but there was this weight that had kind of been lifted when you sort of face your fear. And I might sound like the teachers who were concerned about me reading those books then, but I am concerned about teens living in dystopia because it's you are visualizing a very hopeless world.
Exactly, and that is not my worldview. I always had to imbue hope into a story that and Bantam, or whomever, came up with the tagline, from every ending comes a new beginning, and that new beginning is life. And choose life when you have a choice. And interesting that you should say that, but when a 13-year-old girl gets cancer, her biggest issue is not, am I going to die? At least back then, it's who's going to be my friend.
Yeah.
And when a 16-year-old girl is ill, it's who's going to want to date me when I have bald from chemo, and what guy will love me. So by putting those two elements together in books, it worked.
It definitely did, and I'm sure it helped. And as you know, and I'd love to hear a little bit about it, the real world results of women who grew up reading your book, or girls who grew up reading your book. What are some kind of standout things that have come across in letters and in emails to you?
Glad you should ask, because I have some outstanding. The thing that kept me going all this time were my readers. They would send me the most poignant and touching letters. I have this one. I found the Dawn and One Last Wish books in middle school when I was suffering from my own medical and growing up issues. I had secretly stopped taking my preventive asthma and allergy medications because she felt like she wanted to die. She begged God to take her, but instead it landed her in Johns Hopkins, where a girl was pushing a book cart. You've probably seen that scene in some of my books. And she chose 6 months to live. And she said, that book changed my life. I was reading about someone who went through even more medical crap than I had and still managed to fight and survive. And she opened up to a child specialist, which I recommended highly, and she started collecting my books. I wanted you to know that your books inspired me, and thank you for saving my life. And I mean, what are you going to do with a letter like that but say, cast your bread upon the water and it shall not come back to you void? and that's exactly what happened. So now that girls have grown up, they see through adult eyes. One girl who, she suffered great abuse at home, and she started reading the books. She read the Angel Amish series.
Yes.
And she read about that, a child with leukemia, and she would pretend she would go into that world in her mind when she was being abused, because it's a very sweet, pure book, that the love story, etc. And no one could hurt her in her mind, and that's where hello, that's life-changing when you read that kind of information from someone.
I mean, those letters must have actually been helped you be so insightful about your reader.
Exactly.
Because even, not even knowing what her situation is, the things that you were saying, will anybody ever love me enough? They're so, it's just hyperbolic of everything a teen is feeling.
Exactly.
In a really tough situation. Which I think are just, the idea that teens could be troubleshooting something like this and understanding these emotions and emoting them, I just think it's so powerful. I was never aware, when you sit in a little room staring at a computer screen, and then you get these mails and now Facebook posts, and they pour out their heart because they have no one else to talk to, or think not. They think they don't. But the good fun of it now is, as they've grown up and contacted me, I have you, someone who succeeded in life. I have women who grew up, got married, had babies. I've had lab techs. I'm in oncology today because of your books. I'm a doctor. I'm a nurse. Right. I saw a woman who is now a cancer doctor because she had read your books.
Oh my gosh. And that is just stunning.
There's a world where you wrote 70 to 75,
yes, about
right?
75.
75. There's a world where you, because of your work, we could have a cure for cancer. Which is,
well,
I know it's a jump, but I think that the power of the stories we tell and the people that we influence, I think that it's a very powerful thing.
It is the power of the written word, and nowhere except in the YA novel do teens get to see themselves. Some of them are romanticized versions, and very few of them are archers, like in the dystopia.
Yeah,
but
right. Yeah.
they identified with that spirit.
Yes.
That is in them. That I may not can change the world, but I can change what is happening to me today. And that was the most positive thing of all. So when I know I was having a little minor surgery procedure done here in Chattanooga, and they always tell you, shout out your name, and I don't know what to tell you. But anyway, a gal peeked her head around the curtain that was dividing. She was all in scrubs, and she said, "Are you really Lurlene McDaniel, the writer?" And I said, "Guilty." And she said, "I want you to know that I am a nurse today because I read your books." I said, "Are you kidding?"
And meanwhile, you're in a hospital gown and yelling at your birthday with a hairnet on and
Yes,
ready to go under. Thank God. I mean, you've really secured a savvy, caring medical team around you.
I did.
I'm a comedian. I am obsessed with sad books, which is I think just a beautiful irony that, and I really think it's interesting to explore why I've always been so drawn to it. As a comedian, it's a real toll on me to make people laugh. Really, after a show, I'm exhausted. And and on a very good show, people will come up after you, and tell you what they liked about your joke and thank you for a great night, and then I'm exhausted. So how do you do the opposite? How do you write tragedy? How do you hear people's pain and still wake up the next day to write?
Keep going. It's called deadlines, and the publisher signing the final check.
Those help.
Right, you.
Yeah. Generally speaking, I write comedy, and that's what I really have done. But I always read tragedy.
Well, come on. Everyone knows the link between tragedy and comedy. They're just a teardrop away, and you're laughing because you're sad, or you're laughing because you're happy and crazy happy. And tears.
It's more of a horseshoe than anything, right? Yeah.
Yes, and it's the glue that holds humanity together. And I think comedy is very kind. I wish it were a little less salty.
And I'm the exact same. It's almost it's funny that you even mentioned in knowing too the diabetes story. I had a joke once that I decided to throw out because. Are you familiar kind of with the term of punching up and punching down in comedy? And there was a punchline that I had that basically you would laugh at the expense of diabetes and also all of the assumptions about diabetes.
Yes.
And I was like, why? This is for the laugh that it gets and for it wasn't worth it. And I spend a lot of time trying to, because I know that it's exactly that. It's that joke or that one story that can affect people, and that I'm standing on that stage trying to affect people, so why not do it the best way possible?
You are so right on. I mean, you affect them not to hurt them, but to bring joy. Right. And that's what you're aiming for. Good for you. Yeah. I can't wait to see something.
It's hard, so thank you for saying that. It is very hard. I have to ask while I have you, as an aspiring writer, I know that I have a sad book in me for sure. I know that I have lots of books in me. I've started and stopped many books. I know that it's never easy to give one piece of advice to everybody, but do you have a mantra or a thing you tell aspiring writers?
It is hard to know your craft. You've got to hone your craft and do the very best that you can. If you want to connect with the writing community, you need to possibly go to a writer's conference. They used to be very popular, not so much anymore. But know who you want to write for. That's the main thing, that I knew who I wanted to write to. I wanted to write to you and girls like you. And so, and I knew you. They'd come to those with their little dewy-eyed smiles and to those signings and everything. And it was just frightening almost, because they see you as a role model. You think, oh my gosh, I gotta catch a plane. but
please get away from me. I'm not gonna name a character after you and kill her. I'm sorry. Like,
exactly.
Okay, so, and I did have a question about that. Is there, when you started writing these books, did you know that there was an audience for that? Like, was there a proven audience, or did you say, I think that there is a person who wants to read this, so I'm going to write it?
Well, oddly enough, I literally got invited to write a book. I ran into a woman named Margaret, and she said, my father's a publisher, and that was school book fairs. And she said, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I said, sure. Never once gave it a thought.
Yes, of course.
And you never say no,
Yes.
And so my first serious book was, before 6 Months to Live, was Will I Ever Dance Again?
Yes.
About a ballerina who gets diabetes. Write about what you know about. That's another very critical element when you start writing. Write something you know about. Certainly a girl who wants to do stand-up comedy, you have all the lines already in your heart.
Yes,
and your head. And so putting those two elements together, I was going to write about a boy who, and the woman looked and said, no, you have to write about females, because girls buy books in the store. And so that's why knowing all that I knew about boys, it only helped me in creating unrealistic heroes, but I loved it.
I think that's what I always didn't realize I loved about publishing, but realized that I do, is that girls and women buy books. And it feels like, as a person who works in entertainment, it feels like the only market that caters to women. And, I think that it doesn't really get the spotlight that it deserves in that way, but it is. It's like women read books, and they are cranking them out, and they're reading them. And I think that's really cool.
Absolutely. Well, I was in the romance industry for a long time. Personally, I wrote for inspirational romance where, when they had adults in them. But anyway, so I was double writing. I was writing for this genre over here and the kid genre. And then the divorce came, and I said, which one can I make work? And I figured, clean, whatever's pure, whatever's right, whatever's good, write about these things. That actually, Paul says, think about these things. But I saw write about, and I took that as a word that I should follow. And so I started really talking seriously. I ended up writing over 23 books for school book fairs. And who it's now been bought, who bought and bought, so it's Lerner Publishing, but a lot of those books are still in print.
Now, those book fairs, Scholastic is what is that was who owned it at the time, Scholastic Book Fair? Well,
no, they were a competitor of Scholastic.
Okay.
But and once I joined Bantam, then I went through the Scholastic Book Fairs.
Okay. Because that's truly my first memory of your name having an impact, because that reading teacher who asked my mom if I was doing okay suddenly got really into those books. And in class we'd read Where the Red Fern Grows. Like you could tell she was picking sad ones. So she eventually started to read those too. And I just remember walking into our cafeteria with all the tables pushed aside in the book fair, and I just remember her grabbing me when I walked in and going, "There's new Lurlene McDaniels." And we were and I bought every single one. My mom had given me a check for like $12. She was like, "You can buy 3 books or however much it was," and Those are the ones. It's a childhood reading highlight for me, and somebody who has dedicated her life to reading in the pursuit of knowledge. So it's really, really special to be able to talk to you and hear about your process.
Well, you in comedy, like in writing, you have to do, as I say, it needs to be different but the same. And so you get this persona that you project, and I don't know that I could write a book without some kind of overreaching sadness to it, something that has happened or going to happen. And I've had car wrecks, I've done diseases, I've done, trauma to friends and all of that, heart transplants, I've done it all.
Yeah.
So, but I think the same thing is true in comedy. The comedians who live and survive in the biz, they have a persona that they can project all the time, and it's the same but different.
Right.
Every time they get up and give a monologue.
And that comes from, like you said, a sort of authenticity of being, of writing and doing. Like, I think it's so interesting that when you had that choice, and it was right around the time of your divorce, that you were like, do I want to be writing? They always end in, what did they say about romance? That there's always a happy ending. Like, do I want to be put in that bucket? Like, is that a place I want to be? And the answer is no.
No, I didn't think about the work as being different. I had no idea. But I literally was in a bookstore one day, and some mother was perusing the shelves with the bookstore owner, and she said, now these books are popular, but they're so sad. They cry all the time. And I said, excuse me, I wrote that book. And then, she was, the book was so flustered, the owner.
Yeah, of course.
I know, it's okay, but I know they're different, but the readers love them. And so the mother bought the book, and I hope I had a fan for life.
Yes. And I think, even if it's not specifically for you, it's for somebody, and that somebody really... It's funny, I reread 6 Months to Live recently, downloaded it on my Kindle. I'm sitting across from my fiance on the couch, and I'm reading it, and he looks over at me maybe 25 minutes in, and I just, like, tears, and I look up, and I just go... She still got it. Like, it still gets me. Even when how, I was like, oh, I remember this character. I think this, it still gets me. It doesn't even, and it's so satisfying to get that cry and to get that,
Well, it is cathartic. Because teenage girls, they may not cry at the time an incident happens, the dog dies. They can go shopping with their friends and all that, but it's sooner or later they come across something that makes them cry.
Yes.
And that was usually one of my books.
Yes. And I think that's
get it out.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, you spend your day, especially, working as a TV producer, people are telling me their real stories all day. And you really have to compartmentalize everything. And so sometimes when those tears come, and all the time when those tears come, 50% of those tears belong to a different tragedy. And so you need that to just clean house.
That's a great way of saying it. You said it very well. That's how I have to look. These are just characters. These are people who do not exist. Now, they may be based on someone who I met in my travels or went to cancer camps, and the kid didn't come back the next year and stuff like that. But they are pretend people. They aren't real. And that's what you have to keep reminding yourself when you're writing this style book.
I think, and I hope, this is, I think, a compliment. I hope that you would take it as such. But I actually, I'm really fascinated by almost like the sentimentalness of it isn't something that drives you in a way. You're just like, this is like part of... Like, you have to be reverent for a big part of it, but to keep doing what you're doing, you can't always be. Well, and I find it really refreshing. That's what it is.
Well, that's exactly right. I want you to feel something, even if it's, oh my gosh, how corny is this? You gotta feel when you read fiction. You have to. And there's no sense in bothering if you don't feel something.
Yeah.
And this, I always, I always read this letter when I finish, because I've been very blessed. I've had, a lot of success, and which I'm very pleased for. It certainly paid all the bills and then some. Put 2 kids through college, and I always, as you said, you look for something in your reader that you want to touch. So I've had money, I've had success and fame, but this is this fan taught me the true fame. And she said, I'm a big fan of yours, I love your books, my goal is to own every one of them. See, I liked her right away. And she said, in Murray, Utah, where I live, you are a very popular writer. I know this because all of your books from the Murray Library have been stolen.
That is, you've reached the peak of all.
Peak of success.
That's the peak of, audience success. Done.
One and done.
And they're free at the library, what? But
they just take them.
Sometimes, because you know what? It just is probably sometimes a book is so special that you're just willing to eat up the fee or whatever it is. Because that particular copy of that experience you had, I fully understand.
Well, she just cracked me up. So whenever you want to know the measure of fame.
Yeah, that's it. As soon as your book's stolen from the library, then you've made it.
You've made it, baby.
What will you miss in retirement? And what will you not miss at all in retirement?
I can tell you instantly what I will not miss, and that's deadlines. They were killers. When you have a very active life with 10 grandchildren, I mentioned that, you just don't have much time. Plus, I love to travel, and I wanted to spend more time doing that, and I just had to say, it's time. It's just time. My agent was heartbroken, but...
And she was another girl with a broken heart.
Oh, thank you.
And what will you miss?
What I will miss is this kind of stuff, talking to people that really enjoy reading and that the books affected them, or even if I just read every one you wrote, and they knew my characters better than I did. And I had to reach for it.
Right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
But so I will miss that interaction with fans and readers. Is
there one book that sticks out to you or a character where you think, I wish that one had a different ending?
This is an interesting question because I never, ever begin writing a book until the ending is stamped in my head. I knew how this book was going to end, even down to the phrasing. I knew how Don't Die, My Love was going to end exactly. The planting of the tulips that a friend did for me, and I thought, I was a Florida girl, and here she was planting tulips, and that's in fall, and I said, they're not going to grow, and she said, they come up every spring.
They do.
Yeah. Ending, everything just fell right into my head right then, and that was the one book that got made into a TV movie, but they changed the ending. What were they thinking?
Of course, and of course they did.
So, really, the ending is the POW. And I have to know it's like getting in a car and making a trip without knowing where you want to go. So I always have the ending.
And so and that also, I don't know, maybe that means that you're never going to break your own heart as you're writing. Like, maybe you won't get attached to somebody, and you start knowing how this is going to end.
Yeah, I know how it's going to end. That's what I aim for. I want these 2 characters to say these things, like in the book Losing Gabriel. I had that ending absolutely down to the letter. That last scene was written in my mind before I ever started the book. And I loved writing that book. That was one of my favorite writes, favorite books to write. Fans loved Don't Die by Love. That was my number one book for Random House. And of course, 6 Months to Live. That book came out in 1985, and it's still selling.
Yeah.
So, because it's the universality that there's always a new. This is the other delightful thing about young adult genre, is there's always going to be a new teen growing up, that have the young adult. It's called the era of the first times.
Yes.
In other words, I defy you to forget your first kiss or your first crush, or you can't.
First love, first job, first first car. Yeah.
First, right. Adults are very jaded. They've seen it all, and so I never was attracted to writing for adults. Just kids.
Yeah. I also, and I think this always came through in your writing too, you do have a sense of humor that really comes through. And it seems like humor really has helped you keep going. Do you think that that's part of writing tragedy?
Same answer that why you can write comedy. Those two are really very closely linked. Plus, I have, my readers would write very funny things to me, and I used to get, I thought you would be, when I did appearances, I thought you'd be depressing, and so depressed because you wrote such sad stuff. No, honey, I'm not depressed. I'm only depressed when I can't get through a part of a book I'm writing.
Right. You're only depressed when the deadline is looming.
Yes.
Which is, and it's true too, because even when, I'm trying to write, and I've written some jokes and I've done them at Mike's about how I was obsessed with books about girls dying growing up. And when, in thinking about you as an author, people are like, so what, this woman is just like writing books about kids dying in her basement all day and nobody was like concerned.
That's how I was seen. I perceived. You're absolutely correct.
Like it's tough to go in and be like, no, I'm a person who is dealing with like the entire range of human emotion, and not somebody with black makeup in a basement somewhere or something.
Exactly. And kids are funny. The way they see the world is unique and different. They can't quite translate it all, and I guess that's another thing that brings me down about today's world, is it can be so glum. I don't want it to be glum. I want people to think tomorrow will be better.
That's it. Lurlene McDaniel has broken our hearts for the last time. And I'm really honored that she did it on my show, because honestly, look at my face one more time. What an emotional roller coaster. That's it. Thanks for watching, and happy retirement to Lurlene McDaniel.